The massive alien ship appeared out of nowhere above Earth's moon, like a dark metal mountain floating in space. Its black hull was covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own evil light. This wasn't just any alien vessel. This was the personal warship of Emperor Caxton, ruler of the mighty Vorthak Empire that had crushed 10,000 worlds across the galaxy. For 3 days, the ship had been silent, just hanging there in space like a sword waiting to fall. Earth's billions watched their screens in terror, knowing that death itself had come calling. The Vorthak Empire was legendary throughout the galaxy. They didn't negotiate, didn't show mercy, and never left survivors. Deep inside the Seoul Defense Command Center, buried 300 meters beneath the Korean capital, Admiral Kim Tae stared at the readings on his screen. At 55 years old, he had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, though he had always hoped it would never come. His weathered face showed no emotion as he studied the alien ship's energy patterns, but inside his mind was racing. "Sir, they're powering up their communication array," reported Lieutenant Park Min-ho from his station. The young officer's voice was steady, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Everyone in the command center knew what was coming. Suddenly, every screen on Earth lit up with the same terrifying image, the face of Emperor Caxton himself. The alien ruler looked almost human, except for his pale grey skin and eyes that glowed like burning coals. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound like thunder mixed with the screams of dying worlds. "Pathetic humans of the third planet," Caxton began, his words dripping with contempt. "I am Emperor Caxton, master of the Vorthak Empire, conqueror of galaxies, destroyer of civilizations. Your little world has caught my attention, and that is never a good thing for primitive species like yourselves." The Emperor leaned forward in his throne, and his burning eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. "You have something that belongs to me, your planet, your resources, your very lives. I have come to collect what is mine. You have exactly 72 hours to make your choice. Surrender completely, accept slavery, and some of you might live as servants in my empire. Refuse, and your entire species will be erased from existence like so many others before you." In the command center, Commander Park So-young stood beside Admiral Kim Tae, her fingers dancing across her control panel as she analyzed the alien ship's weapons systems. At 38 years old, she was one of humanity's best tactical minds, and what she was seeing made her blood run cold. The Vorthak ship carried enough firepower to crack planets in half. "Admiral," she whispered, "their weapons signatures match the reports from the Centauri colonies. This is the same ship that destroyed New Shanghai and burned the entire Kepler system." Kim Tae nodded slowly. He had read those reports, had seen the images of dead worlds turned to glass and ash. The Vorthak Empire didn't just conquer, they enjoyed destroying everything beautiful and alive in the universe. On the screens, Caxton was still speaking, his voice growing more menacing with each word. "Do not think your primitive weapons can save you. Do not imagine that distance or hiding will protect you. I have destroyed civilizations that were ancient when your son was young. I have burned worlds that could have crushed your pathetic planet. Like an insect, you are nothing to me, less than nothing." The alien emperor stood up from his throne, and for the first time humans could see his full form, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in what looked like living metal armor that pulsed with dark energy. "I give you this warning only because I'm feeling generous today. Use these 72 hours wisely. Say goodbye to your loved ones, pray to whatever gods you worship. Make peace with your deaths, because they are coming whether you surrender or not." Around the world, panic was spreading like wildfire. In New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow, people were fleeing the cities, emptying stores, and holding their families close. Religious leaders called for prayer, while politicians held emergency meetings that solved nothing. But in the Seoul Command Center, something different was happening. Admiral Kim Tae was smiling, not a happy smile, but the quiet, dangerous smile of a man who had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Commander Park," he said softly, "are they expecting us to beg?" Park, So-young, looked at her admiral, with understanding in her eyes. "Yes, sir, they're expecting us to fall to our knees and plead for mercy." Kim Tae's smile grew wider as he reached for the communication controls. "Then let's not disappoint them." The admiral opened a direct channel to the Vorthak ship, knowing that his next words would determine the fate of humanity itself. The moment Admiral Kim Tae's defiant message reached the Vorthak Empire, everything changed across human space. What had seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning suddenly became the most important day in human history. Across the solar system and beyond, a carefully planned deception that had taken 50 years to perfect was finally being revealed. Captain T. Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of what appeared to be a simple cargo hauler called the Busan Trader. For 15 years, he had played the role of a boring freight captain, hauling supplies between Earth and the outer colonies. The Vorthak scouts had scanned his ship dozens of times, always dismissing it as just another harmless human transport. They had no idea they were looking at one of humanity's most advanced warships. "All hands, this is the captain," Min-ho announced over the ship's intercom. "Operation Ghost Fleet is now active. Prepare for combat transformation." Around him, his crew moved with the precision of a military unit that had trained for this moment their entire lives. What the aliens thought was a crew of simple cargo haulers were actually elite naval officers, each one a specialist in their field. Lieutenant Choi Hee-jin, supposedly the ship's cargo manifest clerk, was actually one of humanity's top weapons officers. Her fingers flew across control panels that had been hidden beneath fake cargo computers for over a decade. "Sir, all weapon systems are coming online. Ghost Fleet protocol is executing perfectly." Outside the ship, an incredible transformation was taking place. The Busan Trader's outer hull began to split apart, like a metal flower blooming in reverse. Massive sections of fake cargo containers fell away, revealing sleek armor plating underneath. What had looked like a bulky, slow freighter was now showing its true form, a predator designed for one purpose: war. Gunports opened along the ship's sides, and weapons that could punch holes through asteroids slid into position. The ship's engines, which had been running at barely 10% power to maintain the civilian disguise, roared to life, with enough force to move mountains. This same transformation was happening all across human space. Near Jupiter, the Incheon mining station had been peacefully extracting helium from the gas giant's atmosphere for 20 years. Vorthak intelligence had filed it as a primitive human industrial facility, nothing more than a simple mining operation. But as the station's outer shell rotated and opened, it revealed something that would have made the aliens' blood run cold. Hidden beneath the mining equipment were enough weapons to level entire fleets. Massive railguns emerged from what had looked like ore processing facilities. Missile silos opened where the aliens thought they were looking at storage tanks. Station. Commander Yoon Jae-sung had been pretending to be a simple mining foreman for 2 decades. In reality, he was a former military strategist who had helped design humanity's greatest deception. "All defensive platforms are active," he reported. "To Earth Command. The Ghost Fleet is ready for war." On Earth's moon, hidden beneath what appeared to be a simple research facility, Colonel Park Jin-woo coordinated the largest military deception in galactic history. The underground base stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with command centers, weapon factories, and training facilities that had been built in absolute secrecy over 5 decades. Park Jin-woo was 62 years old and had devoted his entire adult life to preparing for this day. While the rest of humanity had lived their normal lives, he and thousands of others had worked in the shadows, building an invisible military force that could challenge the greatest empire in the galaxy. "Sir, all Ghost Fleet units are reporting operational status," reported Major Kim Soo-jin from her station. "Phase 1 transformation is complete. We have over 800 combat vessels, where the aliens thought we had maybe 50 cargo ships." Park. Jin-woo smiled grimly as he watched the tactical displays. Every dot of light represented a human ship that was no longer hiding its true nature. Decades of careful planning, of making humanity look weak and primitive, were finally paying off. The deception had been perfect. When Vorthak scouts had visited human space over the years, they had seen exactly what humanity wanted them to see: a young, technologically backward species that posed no threat to anyone. They had catalogued humanity's merchant fleet as a collection of slow, poorly armed vessels that could barely defend themselves against pirates. They had never suspected that every single merchant ship was actually a military vessel in disguise. They had never imagined that humanity's primitive mining stations were actually fortress-class weapons platforms. They had never realized that humanity's peaceful research facilities were cover for the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. The beautiful thing about this plan, Park Jin-woo said to his staff, is that we never had to lie to them. We really are merchants, miners, and researchers. We just happen to be warriors too. As the Vorthak Armada approached Earth, they were expecting to find a defenseless world protected by nothing more than a few patrol boats and outdated missiles. Instead, they were about to face a military force that had been specifically designed to destroy them. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and they didn't even know it yet. The moment Emperor Caxthan's 72-hour deadline expired, the Vorthak fleet struck with the same ruthless efficiency that had destroyed 1,000 worlds. Their massive dreadnoughts spread across space in perfect formation, their hulls crackling with energy, as they prepared to demonstrate why the Vorthak Empire had never lost a single battle in 3,000 years. "Begin planetary bombardment," Caxthan commanded from his flagship's throne room. "Show these insects what happens when they dare to defy the Empire." The alien weapons charged with a sound like thunder rolling across the cosmos. Plasma cannons that could melt continents locked onto their targets. The pitiful human ships that had dared to position themselves between the Vorthak fleet and Earth. These weapons had reduced entire civilizations to ash and glass. No shield in the galaxy could withstand their power. The cannons fired in perfect unison, sending streams of superheated death racing toward the human fleet at nearly the speed of light. Each beam carried enough energy to vaporize a city, and there were hundreds of them painting deadly lines across the darkness of space. But something impossible happened. The plasma beams passed through empty space, hitting nothing but vacuum and starlight. "What?" Caxthan leaned forward on his throne, his burning eyes trying to understand what he was seeing. "Where are the human ships? They were right there." His weapons officer, a scarred veteran who had participated in dozens of planetary destructions, stared at his instruments in confusion. "Emperor, our targeting systems show direct hits on all enemy vessels, but the energy readings, they're showing no impact. It's as if we're firing at ghosts." Suddenly, space itself seemed to shimmer and bend around the Vorthak fleet. What had appeared to be empty void began to reveal shapes, sleek, deadly shapes that materialized like predators, emerging from tall grass. Captain Yoon Seok stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the Incheon, as his ship's cloaking system powered down. For the past hour, his vessel had been completely invisible, using adaptive camouflage technology that bent light around the hull like water flowing around a stone. The Vorthak had been shooting at shadows while the real human fleet positioned itself for the perfect ambush. "All weapons target the lead cruiser," Yoon Seok ordered calmly. "Show them what 50 years of preparation looks like." The Incheon was not like any warship the galaxy had ever seen. While the Vorthak had spent centuries perfecting brute force weapons, humanity had taken a different path. They had studied the Empire's tactics, analyzed every battle recording, and discovered something the aliens had never realized. Their shields operated on predictable energy frequencies, like a lock that used the same combination every time. "Quantum. Displacement field is active," reported Lieutenant Park Hee-min from her engineering station. "We're reading their shield frequency at 847.2 terahertz, adjusting our weapons to phase match." What happened next would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. The Incheon's particle cannons fired beams of pure energy that vibrated at exactly the same frequency as the Vorthak shields. Instead of bouncing off the alien defenses, the human weapons passed right through them, as if they didn't exist. The massive Vorthak cruiser, protected by shields that had never failed in 1,000 battles, was suddenly defenseless. The human weapons carved through its hull like a hot knife through ice, cutting the kilometer-long warship completely in half. Atmosphere and debris exploded into space as the alien vessel died in brilliant fire. "Impossible!" Caxton screamed from his flagship. "Their weapons can't penetrate our shields. Our shields are impenetrable." But across the battlefield, the same thing was happening to ship after ship. Human vessels appeared from nowhere, their weapons ignoring Vorthak defenses completely. Commander Nam Yu-jin, coordinating the attack from her command ship Seoul, watched with satisfaction as decades of careful planning paid off. "All units, this is Commander Nam," she broadcast across the tactical network. "Remember, we know everything about them. We've been studying their shield frequencies for 50 years. Every weakness has been catalogued, every defensive pattern mapped. They have no secrets from us." The truth was even more devastating than the weapons themselves. For half a century, humanity had been preparing for this exact battle. Every time Vorthak ships had visited human space, hidden sensors had recorded their energy signatures. Every battle recording the Empire had ever made had been secretly obtained and analyzed by human scientists. While the Vorthak had conquered through overwhelming force, humanity had conquered through overwhelming knowledge. They knew the frequency of every Vorthak shield, the power output of every weapon, the weakness of every armor design. The Empire's greatest strength, their predictable, unstoppable tactics, had become their greatest weakness. Captain Lee Bo-young, commanding the stealth frigate Daegu, phased her ship directly through a Vorthak battleship's shields and fired her weapons at point-blank range into the enemy's reactor core. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. "Target destroyed," she reported matter-of-factly. "Moving to next objective." Emperor Caxton watched in horror as his invincible fleet was systematically torn apart by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive insects. Ships that had conquered galaxies were dying like flies, their crews screaming in panic as human weapons cut through their defenses like they were made of paper. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "How can they know our shield frequencies? How can they predict our movements?" The answer was simple, though the Emperor would never understand it. Humanity had learned the most important lesson in warfare: never underestimate your enemy and always be prepared. While the Vorthak had grown arrogant from centuries of easy victories, humanity had spent every day getting ready for the fight of their lives. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, and the Empire's day of reckoning had finally arrived. The battle that was supposed to last minutes had stretched into hours, and what should have been humanity's quick death had become the Vorthak Empire's worst nightmare. Emperor Caxton gripped the armrests of his throne so tightly that his claws left gouges in the metal, as he watched his supposedly invincible fleet being torn apart piece by piece. "Retreat!" he finally screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "All ships retreat to hyperspace immediately." But even as his surviving vessels tried to flee, something terrifying was happening. The humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were learning. Every Vorthak ship that was destroyed, every piece of alien technology that was captured, was being studied and analyzed by human artificial intelligence systems that worked faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Captain Kim Dong-woo stood on the bridge of the human battleship Gwangju, watching as his engineering teams worked with mechanical precision. They had just captured a damaged Vorthak destroyer, and within 20 minutes, his ship's AI systems had completely reverse-engineered the alien vessel's power core design. "Sir, we've integrated their energy matrix into our own systems," reported Chief Engineer Park Young-soo. "Our weapons output has increased by 30%, and we've identified 17 new weak points in their hull designs. This wasn't how war was supposed to work. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak Empire had crushed their enemies through pure, overwhelming force. They had never faced an opponent who could adapt and improve during battle itself. But humanity had built their entire military doctrine around one simple principle: learn from everything, adapt to anything, overcome any obstacle. Admiral Bae Sun-ho commanded the human pursuit fleet from his flagship, Busan. At 60 years old, he had spent 4 decades studying Vorthak battle tactics, waiting for this moment. As the alien ships tried to escape to hyperspace, he calmly gave orders that would seal their fate. "All units, execute containment protocol." "7," he commanded. "Block every exit route. They're not leaving this system." The remaining Vorthak ships accelerated toward their predetermined jump points, the same escape routes they had used successfully for centuries. But as they approached each hyperspace entry point, they found human vessels already waiting for them. Ships that had somehow arrived ahead of them, positioned perfectly to cut off every possible escape. "Impossible," screamed Admiral Vextar, Caxthan's second-in-command from his heavy cruiser. "How did they know where we would retreat? These coordinates are classified at the highest levels." The answer lay in the work that Lieutenant Colonel Song Mi-young had been doing for the past 30 years. From her intelligence vessel, Incheon Data, she coordinated the most successful espionage operation in galactic history. While the Vorthak had believed they were dealing with primitive humans, Song Mi-young and her team had been quietly intercepting, hand-decoding every single Empire communication for decades. "Sir, their tactical predictability is their greatest weakness," she reported to Admiral Bay. "They use the same retreat patterns, the same hyperspace routes, the same emergency protocols every single time. We've had their entire tactical doctrine memorized for 20 years. The truth was even more devastating than the Vorthak could imagine. Humanity hadn't just been playing weak, they had been playing stupid. Every time Empire ships had visited human space over the years, they had transmitted data back to their commanders, using what they thought were unbreakable codes. They had never suspected that human mathematicians had cracked their encryption within the first month and had been reading their mail ever since." Captain Yu Seung-ho, commanding the stealth ship Daejeon Shadow, watched as another group of fleeing Vorthak vessels ran straight into his trap. "Target their engines first," he ordered his weapons officer. "We want them disabled, not destroyed. Dead enemies can't tell us their secrets." This was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the human assault. They weren't just winning, they were capturing enemy technology and incorporating it into their own forces in real time. Every disabled Vorthak ship became a source of new weapons, new defenses, new tactical advantages that made the human fleet stronger by the hour. Emperor Caxthan watched in growing horror as his escape routes were systematically cut off. The humans seemed to anticipate his every move, to predict his every tactical decision before he even made it. It was as if they could read his mind, as if they knew his military doctrine better than he did himself. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his bridge crew. "They're reading our movements before we make them. They know what we're going to do before we know it ourselves." Commander Park Jae-sung, monitoring the battle from the human command ship Seoul Victory, allowed himself a small smile. 30 years of signals intelligence, Emperor," he said quietly, knowing the alien couldn't hear him. 30 years of studying every order you've ever given, every tactic you've ever used, every strategic decision you've ever made. We know you better than you know yourself." The mighty Vorthak Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, was being systematically dissected by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive insects. Every ship they lost made the humans stronger. Every tactic they tried had already been anticipated and countered. Every escape route had been blocked before they even attempted to use it. As his flagship shuddered under human weapons fire, Emperor Caxthan finally understood the horrible truth. The humans hadn't just been hiding their military strength. They had been studying their enemies with the patience of scientists and the dedication of scholars. While the Empire had grown fat and lazy from easy victories, humanity had been preparing for the fight of their lives. The terror of the galaxy was about to learn what real terror felt like, the broken remnants of what had once been the most feared. Fleet in the galaxy limped through hyperspace toward the Vorthak homeworld. Emperor Caxthan sat slumped on his throne, staring at the tactical displays that showed the devastating truth. Of his 1,000-ship armada, fewer than 50 vessels had survived the encounter with humanity. "How do we explain this?" whispered Admiral Vextar, his voice hollow with shock. "How do we tell the High Council that we were defeated by primitives? How do we admit that the Empire's greatest fleet was destroyed by a species we thought was barely capable of spaceflight?" The Emperor had no answer. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak Empire had built its power on a simple foundation: overwhelming military superiority. They had never lost a battle, never retreated from a fight, never shown weakness to their enemies. Now, in a single day, that foundation had crumbled to dust. But the survivors' humiliation was only the beginning. As they approached Vorthak space, they discovered that humanity had not been content to simply defend their own world. Admiral Kim Tae's voice suddenly echoed across every communication channel in the Empire, broadcasting on frequencies that should have been impossible for humans to access. "Citizens of the Vorthak Empire," his calm voice spoke in perfect Vorthak language, "your leaders came to our world seeking to enslave us. They demanded that we bow before their power and accept servitude. Today, we have given them our answer. On sea." 1,000 worlds across the Empire, populations that had lived in fear for millennia, stopped their daily activities to listen. Slaves in the mining colonies looked up from their work. Conquered species huddled in their ghettos, pressed closer to their communication devices. Even the Vorthak citizens themselves listened with growing unease. "Your empire has ruled through fear and oppression for far too long," Admiral Kim Tae continued. "You have enslaved entire civilizations, destroyed countless worlds, and spread nothing but suffering across the galaxy. Today, that ends." The words were not a threat, they were a promise, and humanity was already making good on that promise. Captain Lee Yunji commanded the Human Liberation Fleet, Soul Freedom, as it emerged from hyperspace above Kepler 442b, a world that had been under Vorthak occupation for 800 years. The planet's original inhabitants, a peaceful species called the Zelani, had been reduced to slavery, forced to mine precious metals for their alien masters. "All Vorthak military forces, this is Captain Lee of the Human Liberation Fleet," she broadcast to the planet below. "You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate this world. Any attempt to harm the local population will be met with immediate and overwhelming force." The Vorthak garrison commander, General Morthak, had ruled this world with an iron fist for 2 decades. He had crushed dozens of slave rebellions and executed thousands of Zelani who had dared to dream of freedom. Now he stared at his tactical displays in disbelief as human ships appeared throughout his star system. "Impossible," he muttered. "How did they get here so fast? Our fleet was just destroyed at Earth yesterday. How can they already be here 300 light-years away?" The answer was something the Vorthak had never imagined possible. While they had been perfecting weapons of destruction, humanity had been perfecting something far more dangerous: logistics. Human ships could travel faster, strike harder, and coordinate better than anything the Empire had ever seen. Within hours, Vorthak forces were fleeing Kepler 442b in panic. The human ships didn't pursue them, didn't destroy their vessels as they ran. Instead, they focused on something the Empire had never bothered with: helping the people who had suffered under Vorthak rule. Commander Park Sun-woo led the humanitarian mission to the planet's surface. What he found there broke his heart and filled him with rage. The Zelani people, who had once been architects and artists, scientists and philosophers, had been reduced to living in underground tunnels, working 18-hour days in dangerous mines, eating scraps from their masters' tables. "It's okay," he told the frightened Zelani elder who had been chosen to speak with the humans. "You're free now. We're not here to conquer you or enslave you. We're here to help you rebuild your world." The elder, whose name was Kithara, looked at the human with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. "Free?" she whispered. But who will rule us now? Who will tell us what to do?" "You will," Commander Park replied gently. "You'll rule yourselves just like you did before the Vorthak came. We'll help you get back on your feet, help you rebuild your cities and your culture. But this is your world. You get to decide what happens next." This scene was being repeated on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Human fleets appeared in system after system, not as conquerors seeking to replace the Vorthak Empire with their own, but as liberators who wanted nothing more than to set people free. Captain Yoon Min-jung stood on the bridge of her flagship above Vorthak Prime itself, the Empire's capital world. The planet that had been the center of galactic tyranny for 3 millennia was now defenseless, its orbital defenses destroyed, its government in chaos. "All citizens of Vorthak Prime," she broadcast to the planet below, "this is Captain Yoon of the Human Liberation Fleet. We are not here to destroy your world or enslave your people. We are here to offer you something your empire never gave to others, the chance to choose your own future." On the planet's surface, millions of Vorthak citizens watched their screens in amazement. They had been told their entire lives that conquest was the natural order of things, that the strong must always rule the weak. Now they were being offered something they had never imagined possible: the choice to live in peace. The Age of Empires is ending, Captain Li Yunji announced to the assembled human fleet, as they watched former slaves returning to worlds they hadn't seen in generations. The Age of Freedom has begun. Across the galaxy, hundreds of species were learning a truth that would reshape the cosmos forever. Humanity had proven that power didn't have to corrupt, that strength could be used to protect rather than oppress, and that the greatest victory wasn't conquest. It was liberation. The galaxy would never be the same again, and for the first time in millennia, that was a good thing.